The 1990s didn't just give us shiny blockbusters and star-powered franchises. Hidden under the radar were sci-fi films so strange, so daring, they left audiences stunned, sometimes in awe, sometimes in disbelief. But here's the kicker. Most of them have slipped through the cracks of memory. Do you think you know 90s sci-fi? Think again, because the forgotten titles we're about to uncover prove that shock comes in many unexpected forms. Circuitry Man 1990. Imagine a grimy, neon-soaked world where technology is both a lifeline and a poison. That's the cracked mirror universe of Circuitry Man, a 1990s cyber-noir gem few remember. It tosses us into a post-apocalyptic America where the ground itself seems to rot and society limps along under the weight of corruption. Our guide through this ruin, a biomechanical android named Plughead, who's as untrustworthy as he is unforgettable. At its heart, the film follows Lori, a woman trying to smuggle illegal contraband across the ruins of America. Her unlikely companion is Danner, a bioengineered android with more charisma than circuitry. Together, they trek across a wasteland, crawling with bizarre villains and grotesque dangers. But the real showstopper is Plughead, a sadistic figure who literally connects into other people's nervous systems through the wires embedded in his head. One wrong encounter with him, and you're his puppet. Visually, the film reeks of late 80s, early 90s grit. Think fluorescent lighting, smoke-filled rooms, and tech that looks both advanced and decayed. Audiences at the time didn't know what to make of it, calling it weird and unsettling. But isn't that the point of sci-fi? To show us a future so warped, we can't look away. Forgotten today, Circuitry Man still shocks by proving you don't need a big budget to make nightmares feel real. Hardware 1990. What happens when a piece of military junk refuses to stay dead? You get Hardware, one of the most unnerving low-budget shockers of the 90s. This film kicks off when a scavenger drags home a pile of scrap metal, only to discover it's part of a self-repairing robot designed for one thing: killing. And like a cockroach after a nuclear blast, it just won't quit. The movie is a claustrophobic fever dream, set almost entirely in a dingy apartment owned by Jill, a sculptor who unwittingly turns the killer robot into a centerpiece for her art. Big mistake. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt, the machine rebuilds itself and stalks her through strobe-lit rooms, turning everyday appliances into weapons. The walls seem to close in, and the film's grinding soundtrack, featuring Iggy Pop and Ministry, makes the whole thing feel like a nightmare, set to industrial noise. Audiences expecting clean, futuristic spectacle were rattled. This wasn't shiny sci-fi. It was dirty, sweaty, and soaked in paranoia. Critics dismissed it as derivative, but fans saw something different, a warning wrapped in rusted metal. That even in the ruins of the world, our old technology might rise again, stronger and more merciless than before. Forgotten by many, Hardware still burns in the minds of those who dared to watch its mechanical terror unfold. Body Snatchers 1993. In the 90s, horror and sci-fi crossovers were everywhere, but none hit as close to home as Body Snatchers, a remake that took Jack Finney's classic tale and dropped it onto a military base. Already a place built on conformity and command, the base became the perfect hunting ground for alien invaders who replace humans with cold, soulless duplicates. Director Abel Ferrara, known for his gritty, unsettling style, cranked up the paranoia. We follow Marty Malone, a teenager who realizes her family and neighbors are being quietly replaced, one by one, until no one can be trusted. The most haunting scene? When her stepmother transforms into a pod person in plain sight, skin collapsing, body twitching, humanity draining away. It was the kind of imagery that lodged itself into your brain long after the credits rolled. What made this version shocking wasn't just the body horror, it was the choice of setting. Soldiers, supposed defenders of humanity, become easy prey to an invisible threat. Authority offers no safety. And unlike earlier versions, this one didn't flinch from showing the bleak endgame. No hopeful rally cry, just the chilling suggestion that resistance might already be futile. Forgotten by mainstream audiences, Body Snatchers still lingers like a whispered warning. The scariest invasion is the one that happens in your own home. The Arrival 1991. No, not the Charlie Sheen alien conspiracy film from '96. This arrival came earlier, in 1991, and it's the weirder, creepier cousin. The story begins when an elderly man mysteriously rejuvenates into a younger version of himself, all thanks to an alien parasite that takes over his body. Sounds like a dream come true? Not when the transformation demands a steady diet of fresh blood. This bizarre sci-fi thriller follows scientist Zane Zeminski as he unravels the mystery of the alien intruder. What makes it stand out isn't just the grotesque imagery, the stretching skin, the too smooth regeneration, but the existential dread that pulses through every frame. The idea that something alien can wear your face, your life, your very identity, and still not be you. Audiences were blindsided. The 90s were supposed to be about sleek space adventures and popcorn-friendly thrills. Instead, the arrival delivered something queasier, something harder to shake off. It didn't light up the box office, but it shocked the ones who found it, sticking in memory like a nightmare you can't explain. Today, it's nearly forgotten, buried under louder sci-fi hits. But those who know it remember the chill, aging reversed at a price too terrible to pay. Wedlock, 1991. Prison stories are usually grim. Add futuristic collars that explode if you stray too far from your assigned mate, and you've got Wedlock, one of the most underappreciated sci-fi thrillers of the 90s. Rutger Hauer stars as Frank, a thief trapped in a prison without bars, where the only escape is trust and betrayal. Here's the hook. Each prisoner is paired with another. If one tries to run, both their collars detonate. The catch? No one knows who their partner is. It's a psychological game as much as a physical one, and Frank soon realizes the system is designed less to rehabilitate and more to humiliate and destroy. The tension simmers as Frank navigates allies and enemies, each encounter charged with the possibility that his next step could be his last. Hauer, with his trademark intensity, turns what could have been a cheap gimmick into something thrilling. The collars themselves, bulky, blinking, terrifying, became the film's unforgettable image. Audiences gasped not just at the explosions, but at the cruel brilliance of the setup. While it never achieved mainstream fame, Wedlock shocked viewers who stumbled across it on late-night cable. It reminded us that sometimes the scariest prison isn't made of steel bars, it's built inside your own mind. Forgotten now, it remains a hidden gem that dared to mix action, psychology, and sci-fi menace in one brutal package. The Fifth Element, 1997. It's hard to call a film starring Bruce Willis and Mila Jovovich forgotten, but believe it or not, The Fifth Element was dismissed by many on its release. Critics couldn't decide if it was genius or nonsense. Audiences were split, some dazzled, some bewildered. What's shocking is that a film this wild didn't immediately become the classic it deserved to be. Director Luc Besson threw everything at the screen: flying taxis, buzzing through futuristic skyscrapers, an alien opera singer whose voice literally shatters glass, and a love story that somehow anchors the chaos. Jovovich's Lilu wasn't just another sci-fi heroine, she was a force of nature wrapped in orange hair and ancient prophecy. Willis, playing a grizzled cab driver, became the unlikely savior of the universe. And then there's Gary Oldman, hamming it up as the unforgettable villain Zorg, a character so bizarre he could have walked straight out of a comic book. What shocked audiences wasn't just the visuals, it was the tone. It was bright, funny, absurd, and yet deadly serious. At a time when sci-fi leaned toward gritty realism, The Fifth Element dared to be colorful, operatic, and utterly unapologetic. Once mocked as over-the-top, it has since earned cult status. The real surprise? How much this so-called misfire ended up influencing the look and feel of sci-fi blockbusters that followed. Cube, 1997. Few films have managed to turn simplicity into sheer terror like Cube. The setup is almost insultingly basic. Strangers wake up in a giant cube-shaped room. Each door leads to another cube, some rigged with lethal traps, others leading nowhere. No explanation, no escape. Just an endless maze. Shot on a shoestring budget in Canada but embraced by American audiences, Cube terrified with what it didn't show. The sterile sets, the paranoia, the sense that every step might be your last. It was claustrophobia turned into cinema. Characters argued, turned on each other, and broke down as the maze itself seemed to play games with their minds. What shocked audiences wasn't just the inventive traps, acid sprays, wire slicing, spike-filled chambers, but the psychological tension. How do you trust anyone when your life depends on a stranger's math skills, or when the cube seems designed to chew up human hope and spit it out? Though it barely made a blip in theaters, word of mouth transformed Cube into a cult juggernaut. For many, it was their first taste of puzzle box horror, a genre that would explode later with films like Saw. Forgotten by casual moviegoers but legendary to fans, Cube proved you don't need sprawling sets or aliens to shock. You just need four walls, a few terrified people, and no way out. Open Your Eyes, 1997. Before Tom Cruise remade it as Vanilla Sky, there was Abre los Ojos, Open Your Eyes. Though a Spanish production, it struck American audiences like lightning when it crossed over, delivering a story that was both sci-fi and nightmare. It wasn't about space battles or killer robots. It was about the mind, memory, and how fragile our sense of reality can be. The story follows Cesar, a wealthy playboy whose life unravels after a car crash leaves him disfigured. As he grapples with surgeries, new relationships, and his own unraveling sanity, the film slowly peels back the curtain. Is Cesar living in reality, or is he trapped in a dreamlike simulation? What shocked audiences was the film's audacity to keep you guessing until the very end. Was it tragedy, sci-fi, a love story, all of the above? The blurring of dream and reality left viewers disturbed, unsettled, and questioning their own perceptions. It was the kind of movie that sparked debates in coffee shops long after the credits rolled. Though the Cruise-led remake stole the spotlight, Open Your Eyes remains the rawer, more shocking version. It proved that sci-fi doesn't always need spaceships. It can just as easily play out in the human brain, where reality itself is the most dangerous trap. Dark City, 1998. If The Matrix bent your mind, Dark City did it first. Released a year earlier, this neo-noir fever dream stunned audiences with its unsettling vision. A city where time stops at midnight, buildings twist and reshape themselves like clay, and shadowy figures known only as the Strangers rewrite human memories at will. At the heart of the story is John Murdoch, a man who wakes up with no memory in a grimy bathtub. Quickly, he realizes he's different, immune to the nightly manipulations that erase and rewrite the lives of everyone else around him. As he digs deeper, Murdoch uncovers a horrifying truth. The city isn't real in the way we think. It's a giant experiment run by an alien race, studying humanity like lab rats trapped inside a maze. Every night, identities are shuffled, lives are swapped, and memories are fabricated, all to answer one terrifying question: what makes us who we are? Visually, the film was unlike anything audiences had seen in the late 90s. Towering Art Deco skylines stretched into infinity, entire city blocks folded and shifted in seconds, and pale, bald strangers floated like living nightmares through the darkness. Critics compared it to Metropolis and Blade Runner, but its surreal, dreamlike atmosphere was entirely its own. What truly shocked viewers wasn't just the style or the story. It was the bleak idea that identity itself could be an illusion, nothing more than a script written by someone else. Though overshadowed at release, especially after The Matrix arrived a year later, Dark City has since been recognized as one of the boldest and most unsettling sci-fi films of the decade. Forgotten by many, it still haunts anyone who dares step into its eternal midnight. Gattaca, 1997. What if your DNA determined your destiny? That's the chilling premise behind Gattaca, a film that shocked not with explosions or aliens, but with the terrifying calm of its vision. In this near future, society doesn't wait for you to prove yourself. The moment you're born, your genes are scanned like a resume. One look at your DNA decides whether you're destined for greatness or condemned to a life of mediocrity. It's polished, sterile, and horrifyingly believable. Ethan Hawke plays Vincent, a man born imperfect. A heart condition means he's labeled an invalid, someone unfit for ambition. But Vincent refuses to let biology dictate his fate. He assumes the identity of Jerome, a genetically perfect man played by Jude Law, and risks everything to chase his dream of traveling into space. Every step is a gamble. One stray eyelash or a single drop of blood could expose him. What shocked audiences was how ordinary the world looked. No laser battles, no alien invasions, just glass offices, white hallways, and the suffocating weight of discrimination dressed up as science. In the 1990s, as genetic engineering and testing were becoming hot-button issues, Gattaca felt eerily plausible. It wasn't entertainment, it was a warning that technology could one day reduce human potential to a readout of probabilities. The film stumbled at the box office, overshadowed by louder blockbusters, but its legacy has only grown. Today, it's regarded as one of the most thought-provoking sci-fi films of its era. What makes it unforgettable is the gut punch it leaves behind. Are we defined by the code in our cells or by the grit in our hearts? That haunting dilemma is what keeps Gattaca alive, long after other 90s sci-fi has faded into memory. Strange Days, 1995. Before the internet boom reshaped everything, Strange Days dared to imagine a world where experiences themselves could be bought and sold like drugs. Directed by Kathryn Bigelow, this dark sci-fi thriller shocked audiences with its unflinching look at voyeurism, corruption, and obsession. Its premise was simple but disturbing. Illegal devices record people's memories and sensations, which can then be replayed by others as if they lived them firsthand. At the center is Lenny Nero, a sleazy ex-cop turned black market dealer of these recordings. He isn't selling narcotics, he's selling life itself. A kiss, a joyride, a crime, even someone else's darkest moments, all available for the right price. But when Lenny stumbles across a recording tied to a high-level political conspiracy, his underground hustle suddenly makes him a target for both criminals and the authorities. What truly shocked audiences wasn't the futuristic tech, but the brutal honesty of the execution. The film didn't sugarcoat humanity's hunger for escape. The opening scene, shot in dizzying first-person perspective, throws you headlong into a robbery gone wrong. For the first time, viewers felt what it was like to commit a crime through someone else's eyes, and they weren't ready for the intensity. It was immersive in a way movies had never been. On release, Strange Days flopped at the box office, dismissed as too strange, too dark, too uncomfortable. But over time, it's aged like prophecy. In a world obsessed with virtual reality, streaming, and digital identity, the film feels eerily ahead of its time. Forgotten by many, it shocks today not because it predicted the future, but because it exposed a truth we're still wrestling with: how easily we can lose ourselves chasing borrowed sensations. Fire in the Sky, 1993. Not every sci-fi shocker comes from dystopian futures or killer machines. Sometimes the most unsettling stories are the ones claiming to be true. Fire in the Sky dramatized the controversial account of Travis Walton, an Arizona logger who in 1975 vanished for 5 days, later insisting he was abducted by aliens. Whether you believed him or not, the movie adaptation delivered pure nightmare fuel. The film builds with slow burn suspense, focusing on the disbelief and suspicion that falls on Walton's fellow loggers after he disappears. Accused of murder, they're hounded by police and the community until Walton suddenly reappears, shaken, filthy, and unable to explain where he's been. But when the film finally reveals his abduction in a harrowing flashback, audiences were stunned into silence. That sequence remains one of the most terrifying alien encounters ever put on film. Walton is dragged into a ship, stripped of control, and strapped to a cold, metallic table. Around him, distorted alien faces leer as slimy pods line the walls, and surgical instruments hover with clinical menace. The detail is grotesque: needles, restraints, suffocating membranes, all rendered with such precision that even hardened sci-fi fans squirmed. What made Fire in the Sky truly shocking was its tone. There was no tongue-in-cheek humor, no cinematic wink. It played everything with grave seriousness, daring the audience to ask, what if this really happened? The result was a film that left viewers rattled long after they left the theater. Overshadowed by louder 90s blockbusters, Fire in the Sky has since faded from mainstream memory. But for those who saw it, the shock remains unforgettable. It strips away the wonder of alien contact and replaces it with something colder. The possibility that survival doesn't mean safety, only trauma. Brainscan, 1994. In the mid-90s, CDROMS and video games were cutting edge, carrying both promise and paranoia. Brainscan took that unease and twisted it into something deeply surreal. The story follows Michael, a lonely teenage gamer who discovers a new interactive horror program called Brainscan. What begins as a game of simulated murder quickly becomes something more sinister, blurring the line between play and reality until Michael can't tell which side he's on. At the center of the nightmare is the Trickster, one of the strangest villains of the decade. Bizarre, flamboyant, and unsettlingly grinning, he crawls out of the game itself to torment Michael. With his mocking humor and manic energy, the Trickster insists that the murders Michael committed in-game have spilled into the real world. Suddenly, the safe thrill of playing is replaced with a suffocating paranoia. Is Michael a killer or just a pawn in someone else's twisted design? What rattled audiences wasn't gore or spectacle, but the concept itself that entertainment could infect reality. In the 90s, video games were already under fire for supposedly corrupting young minds. Brainscan poured gasoline on that cultural fear. It leaned into surreal visuals, eerie humor, and a constant sense of dread, creating a film that felt like being trapped in a glitching console that refused to shut off. Though largely forgotten now, the film shocked those who stumbled across it, because its horror was so specific to its time. Watching Brainscan feels like booting up a cursed disc, one that lures you in with flashy graphics and refuses to let you quit, even as it rewrites the rules of your own life. It remains one of the weirdest, most unsettling sci-fi curiosities of the decade. Freaked, 1993. If you think sci-fi always has to be serious, Freaked smashes that assumption to pieces. Co-directed by Alex Winter, yes, the same Alex Winter from Bill and Ted, this film is a chaotic collision of body horror, satire, and outrageous comedy. On the surface, it tells the story of a self-absorbed actor who stumbles into the lab of a deranged scientist. But instead of stitched-together monsters in the Frankenstein tradition, this villain gleefully mutates people into grotesque hybrids. What shocked audiences wasn't just the premise, it was the audacity of the visuals. A man turned into a literal sock puppet. Another fused into a half-cow, half-human abomination. One poor soul became a walking cartoon parody of himself. And at the center, the arrogant star of the story slowly begins to transform into something monstrous, caught in the circus of freaks that the scientist proudly parades like a twisted sideshow. The tone was too strange to pigeonhole. It was too grotesque for family audiences, too absurd for horror fans, and too dark for mainstream comedy. As a result, the film bombed in theaters. Studios didn't know how to market something this bizarre, and it was quickly buried under the louder hits of the decade. But for those who actually saw it, Freaked was unforgettable. It felt like a Technicolor fever dream, part carnival, part nightmare, part satire, on Hollywood's obsession with vanity and image. Its manic energy made it one of the most visually shocking oddities of the 90s. Though largely forgotten today, clips of Freaked floating around the internet prove why it stuck with the brave few who watched it. It wasn't just about mutation. It was about ripping apart superficiality itself, limb by limb, laugh by laugh, until nothing was left but gleeful chaos. Feeders, 1996. Sometimes shock doesn't come from polish. It comes from how rough and unfiltered a film can be. Feeders, a micro-budget alien invasion flick, is living proof. Shot on video for pennies, two guys who stumble across an alien attack while driving through small-town America. The creatures themselves, tiny rubber puppets that look laughable at first glance. But here's the twist. They're terrifying precisely because of how cheap and uncanny they appear. The shaky camera work, grainy lighting, and awkward acting don't hide the flaws. They amplify them. The whole movie feels like a strange home video you weren't supposed to watch, teetering on the edge of parody and nightmare. You don't feel safe because it doesn't behave like a traditional movie. Instead, it feels like raw footage, the kind of thing someone left behind after something went very wrong. Audiences who found it on VHS in the late 90s were blindsided. Was it supposed to be scary? Was it supposed to be funny? Or was it an accident that somehow made its way into video stores across America? Maybe all three. What mattered was the shock value. Feeders became infamous for being one of the cheapest films ever stocked by Blockbuster. Curious teens rented it expecting goofy fun, and many ended up unsettled in ways they couldn't quite explain. Today, Feeders is mostly forgotten, dismissed as bargain bin schlock. But for those who experienced it, the memory sticks. Its cheap effects, uncanny aliens, and strange energy created something more disturbing than polished Hollywood spectacle ever could. It remains proof that sometimes the scariest sci-fi doesn't come from big budgets or dazzling visuals. It comes from raw chaos, captured by filmmakers who had nothing but wild ideas and the nerve to put them on tape. So, there you have it. 15 forgotten sci-fi films from the 1990s that dared to shock, disturb, and push audiences in directions they didn't expect. From android nightmares and claustrophobic cubes to DNA dystopias and rubber aliens, these films remind us that the decade wasn't just about blockbusters. It was about risks, oddities, and stories too wild to stay mainstream. Which of these do you remember? Which do you want to watch now? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget, subscribe for more hidden gems that Hollywood tried to bury.